I was going to start actually with the Department of Finance and the LAO and then go to the response. So I'm going to go ahead now and go give the Department of Finance and the LAO the opportunity to make your presentations, and then we'll hear from the other panelists. So, thank you.
Chris Hill with the Department of Finance. The measure that we proposed, it creates a mechanism to effectuate the transfer of the affected taxing entities of the unencumbered cash assets to the former redevelopment agencies. And this is to be done in accordance with Assembly Bill 26. This is a requirement of AB 26, and we are just creating a mechanism or a framework to make that work more effectively. And we did not have any budget savings scored with this at the governor's budget because of the fact that we, number one, there wasn't really a mechanism to effectuate the transfers, and number two, we didn't have a good idea as to what sort of the volume of money we were talking about. But now that we have some data from the State Controller's Office for the 2010-11 fiscal year, we've been able to identify a pool of approximately $4.8 billion in unencumbered assets, which includes low and moderate income housing assets and various other funds. And we have extrapolated from that approximately $1.4 billion in Proposition 98 general fund savings can be achieved in the 2012-13 fiscal year by transferring these monies in accordance with AB 26. And we are proposing this as a budget solution. And there will be an additional $600 million to flow to schools in the 2013-14 fiscal year. And as the previous speaker alluded to, the bill also makes various technical changes to Assembly Bill 26 to make it more operative, to make it work more effectively. We do clarify what does and does not constitute a housing asset to cover those properties that were purchased in whole or in part with low and moderate income housing funds. We create a mechanism for successor agency oversight boards to effectuate the transfer of those mixed-use properties to the housing successor agencies. And we also clarify that rents and other payments associated with low and moderate income housing properties can be used to maintain the properties and to also maintain affordability covenants, which we understand was there was concern that the previous bill did not provide that authority. And we also make various technical operative changes to the bill, such as clarifying due dates for recognized obligation payment schedules and various other things, just to make the bill work more effectively. And in terms of the refunding of the bonds, I'd like to address that in particular. We do have a mechanism in the bill that would allow refunding. We believe this is declaratory of existing law, and we also would note that there is a review period for finance that can be extended for up to 60 days to review these proposals to ensure that they will not result in the successor agency incurring an additional amount of debt. This is just, again, just to ensure that the bonds could be refunded in such a way that you're reducing the total volume of debt that has to be funded. So in other words, you're not increasing the debt of the former redevelopment agency. And I'd also like to address the comments that were made concerning finance's ability to determine what is and is not an enforceable obligation. And there was concern about the fact that there might not be standards for finance to use when determining what is and is not an enforceable obligation. And I would just point out that we do have standards, and those standards are in Assembly Bill X-126, and we are applying those standards. We are applying the requirements of the bill whenever we review a recognized obligation payment schedule. So we're not making things up arbitrarily. We are doing the best we can to interpret the requirements of the bill and to apply those requirements. And some of the changes that we're proposing in our trailer bill language to actually make that work more effectively.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, members, Mary Ann OMalley with the Legislative Analyst Office. The May revision assumes that the dissolution of redevelopment will provide a $3.2 billion budget solution in the current and budget year. The administration has recently released this trailer legislation that makes a variety of sensitive and significant changes to ABX 26. And your staff recommendation is to hold the matter open pending further review, and we think that that's meritorious.
Thank you. So now we'll go to the other panel members. I think we have Mayor David Glass from Petaluma. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, honorable members of the committee. I want to thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. I understand the difficulties that the state of California is in. I just retired as a municipal securities principal. However, what we're looking for in the city of Petaluma is one of fairness, one of clarity with the rules, because we've tried to play by the rules. And I'm going to tell you our particular story of this. I noticed that the staff report says this is corrections and cleanup. In our case, it wouldn't clean it up, it would clean us out. It says this is clarifications of the law. We certainly would welcome that because we believe in fairness. We've played by all of the rules as we knew them to be. And it talks about remedies for bad actions. What this really is a remedy that will deny us the ability to implement a long-term vision. So how specifically has the law to date affected us? I will tell you where we are in the city of Petaluma, and you may know our community, you may not. We're 32 miles north of the Golden Gate Bridge, by all stretch of the definition, one of the more affluent communities probably in the state of California. And yet with this crisis that we've all managed our way through, we've seen our general fund budget go from $48 million to $32.5 million today. We've seen our city payroll reduced from 350 employees to 266. We've seen our general fund reserves decline from $8 million to $376,000, with a projection in 2 years of having $130,000 in totality of our reserves on a $32.5 million operating budget for our general fund. So we're in dire straits, and what concerns me when I look at this in the trailer legislation is the clawback features that might put either an interruption or a halt to our sales tax and to our property tax. We can't afford not getting what's due us, and we can't afford any interruption or time delay in those cash flows. One of the projects talked about this clears up unencumbered assets. We certainly would like to see that cleared up, because we have one project that was a $28 million project, East Washington and Highway 101, our most important intersection in town, that is a $28 million project, $4 million of redevelopment funds, and that project is listed by the Department of Finance as one that did not qualify. It's under construction. I don't know that we have the money to stop that construction. I don't know that with the definition from the Department of Finance that we have the money to finish the construction. I do know that we need a determination here on that. We have another project that was approved in 2003 by the City Council. These are long-term projects that require a great deal of time to get them shovel-ready to put people to work and provide the infrastructure that's been promised. The old Redwood Highway Freeway Interchange at Highway 101 is a $41.5 million project that we have $15 million of what we thought was our money in the bank, and it's ready to go out to bid. It's ready to go under construction. Significant development has taken place relying on these safety improvements and on the traffic flow, and we're now caught in a limbo land, and we're looking at trailer bill legislation that would, if we proceeded forward, cause us to, deliver money on a clawback that we don't have. So what I'm looking at with the trailer bill as a mayor of this town, and this is my second term, I'm looking at bankruptcy as being maybe the only viable alternative for this community. And if it affects Petaluma, which has had an investment grade rating on its redevelopment debt and has weathered this storm to date to that degree of ramification that the only choice for us would be file bankruptcy, I can't begin to guess, and probably neither can you, how many communities are similarly impacted by the unintended consequences of this legislation. I would ask you to please consider the Speaker's remedy that he has provided in legislative form for you. I would ask that we look and find some other avenue. There's got to be a better way. That's all I'm here pleading for, is there's got to be a better way than to say that projects that are under construction or ready to go out to bid somehow do not meet the definition of an unencumbered asset. Thank you very much for your time, and I appreciate being here.
Thank you. Dan Keurig.
Thank you. Madam Chair and members, Dan Keurig on behalf of the League of California Cities. Just to echo a couple of things that the mayor said. First of all, you had a process in AB 26 that was structured in a way that actually allowed for community input. It set up these oversight boards that had the schools on it, had the counties on it, had the special districts on it, had city representation, had some labor representation. And the idea behind these boards is that they would performed the balance that I think you would expect to happen in a tool like this that's being dissolved. Look at the projects. What are the things that are worth continuing and completing versus do I score another dollar today? Those decisions were made all around the state, such as in the mayor's situation. That oversight board had a public hearing, went through this process, looked at the project, decided that it was better to actually fix a highway that was already under construction than just try to pull a couple of dollars out of it. And so those are the things we're talking about. In the testimony, Mr. Hill described this bill as technical and clarifying. It's much more than that. Under this measure, the role of the oversight boards, this community input, they're basically pushed to the side. The entity that's empowered is the Department of Finance, very significantly, to the detriment of any community that may have a dispute with them. The prior witness also talked about the lack of transparency. I would argue this trailer bill is replete with the lack of transparency or due process. It's one thing to get to send your thing to Sacramento and get it denied, but there ought to be a clear reason for the denial, and it ought to be backed up by the law. And we would argue there are many provisions in 26. I think probably some of the reason the Department of Finance has about a 30-some page bill clarifying the law is they know there's lots of problems in the law. They know there's lots of gray areas. And to the extent they can tighten up this law to their benefit, I understand exactly why they're trying to do that. I think the policy question for this body is we all know where we are in terms of redevelopment being eliminated. I think the question is, where do we go from here and how do we go from here? Now, many legislators in this building have said, we really didn't want to eliminate redevelopment. Okay, we have that and there's an area of agreement, but we know it's been eliminated. How do we transition away from it? The Speaker's bill, we would argue, is the much more prudent path. It tries to balance between preserving those things, the housing assets, or recognizing legitimate loans that were made, under prior law, with necessary technical corrections. Tries to provide a balanced way to end this tool. This bill, I would suggest, is much more crash and burn. It's simply take everything you can possibly get. Don't really worry about what the actual impacts are on the ground. And I would stipulate that this is something that the legislature ought to take seriously about how to transition this tool. Because we're all talking about other policies we want in this building. We're talking about SB 375, transit-oriented development. There's other groups of legislators in this building working on talking about new tools. What's the relationship going to be between local government and the state if this sort of measure goes through? And this is the dynamic we have to deal with for the next 10 or 15 years. I would urge the members to read this bill carefully. It is not a technical bill. It is not simply clarifications. There are some positive provisions in there, but we are very concerned about the thrust of this bill and its effort to undermine local authority and flexibility, and also eliminate our ability to defend what we think are legitimate decisions, such as the mayor's.
Thank you.